When I was 12, some of my classmates enlightened me that there was no Santa Claus. I was one of the more gullible kids, although I had misgivings about the concept of a man being able to deliver presents all over the world in a single night. I needed someone to confirm it. When it was, I thought about all the times my parents had used the classic line on me. If you don't behave, Simon, you'll end up on the naughty list. Even trying my best didn't even seem to get me some of the things that I wanted. That was if my dad didn't pawn whatever I got to go binge at our local bar. For these reasons, I saw this as justification to become a nightmare to my parents for the next 4 years. I refused to cooperate with anything unless it was necessary. I argued with my teachers and frequently skipped classes. When someone is that young, they think they're invincible, and I was no different. The night he came to give me a much-needed rude awakening is one I will never forget. It was December 4th, about to roll over into the 5th. That day, I was in a fight with some kid who kept flinging mashed potatoes at me during lunch. To make a long story short, we both got time off from school. His was due to a broken leg from being knocked down a flight of stairs. Mine was thanks to Oz. By this point, my parents dealt with me with a hands-off approach. They did leave me alone a lot, so I guess there was some trust that I wouldn't burn the house down. That night, they were playing darts, which meant they'd be too drunk to drive home. I didn't get up to much by myself, just playing Halo and listening to music I found edgy. "Get owned, you fucking bitch," I smugly told an enemy player who'd been taunting me the entire match. As I was teabagging him, the lights began flickering. It wasn't the first time this had happened, so I didn't think much of it beyond frustration. "No, god damn it, not now!" I was plunged into darkness, with my team being only 1 point away from victory. With an annoyed sigh, I felt around my desk drawer before pulling out a flashlight. Then I was making my way to the breaker box. It was after coming back up from the basement that I noticed an odd smell. It was one of goats and soot. Going to the fireplace, I tilted my head in confusion to see several ashy hoof prints going from it to the stairs. Remembering my poor Xbox was defenseless, I grabbed a poker and raced up the steps as fast as I could. Bursting into the room, I saw him, standing tall enough for his horns to scrape the ceiling. He had an impressive physique, being broad-shouldered, with thick legs ending in hooves. At the time, I assumed this was a costumed burglar. I didn't have any clue who Krampus was. The fact he was holding my Xbox transformed any fear I had into a seething rage. "Hey, put that down, you piece of shit, before I beat your ass 6 ways to Saturday," I demanded. He turned, unfazed by my threat or the poker. On him was a burlap bag that he proceeded to put my game console in. Furious, I took a swing at his head and missed. Thinking that was a fluke, I attempted several more times to land a strike. Each one he was able to evade with ease despite his size. I didn't have a clue what was happening. All I knew was that this dude was pissing me off. Throwing down the poker, I told him, "All right, you dodgy little bitch. Why don't you quit being a pussy and fight like a man?" One positive thing I inherited from my dad was his imposing stature. To enhance this, I regularly exercised, doing cardio and strength training. With that said, this fight was one-sided and not in my favour. Throwing a hard jab at his face, I was stunned when he caught it by his hand. Sorry, I'm not exactly a man. With a single blow to the stomach, I was sent flying across my room, hitting the mirror hanging in front of my closet and breaking it. Or human, for that matter. Wincing, I got up. "Okay, that was pretty good," I said. "But let's see you do that shit again." Letting out a battle cry, I rushed him. Shortly later, I was thrown into the hall with several broken ribs and multiple bruises. I knew then he was not someone to be messed with. Struggling now, I used the banister near the stairs to hoist myself up. "Okay, look man, I don't want any trouble. I get it. You're tough. Please, just let my Xbox go. My parents have a TV that's way more expensive in their room. Take that instead." "You don't know who I am, I take it." Should I? His lips spread apart, cracking into a pointy grin. I could have sworn I heard the bones in his face cracking when he did. Allow me to fill you in then. From thin air, he pulled out a long chain. My mouth went dry upon seeing this. No, that has to be some kind of trick. You see, Simon, Santa, yes, that one, he's real. Anyway, sometimes those who are naughty need to be punished with more than coal. That's where I come in. Therefore, the last name you ever hear is going to be Krampus. What exactly is it you do? Beat the shit out of brats and drag them to hell? A long pause passed before I responded. Fuck that! And dashed down the stairs. My one chance against him lay in my dad's gun locker he kept in his trophy room. What upped my anxiety was how Krampus chose to give chase. He wasn't running. It was as if he knew time was on his side. Getting into the trophy room, I managed to keep from tripping over the pile of discarded beer cans as I got to the locker. Key, where's the fucking key? I hissed, searching. A clawed finger tapped me on the shoulder. Glancing back, showed me a furry open palm containing the key. Wow, thanks, I said, taking it, as I was getting ready to retrieve my dad's hunting rifle. The dots connected. Oh shit, I murmured, turning around and getting backhanded, knocking me out cold. The migraine I woke up with was quickly forgotten, thanks to me fighting not to shit my pants, as I found myself suspended over a giant boiling pot of stew. Pointy-eared creatures dressed in comedy and tragedy masks were adding spices to it. Krampus came in wearing a chef hat and an apron. How's the broth coming along? He asked his elves. It's nearly complete, master, one of them replied. Their voices were raspy, as if they were feral beasts that had only recently grasped a rudimentary skill of human language. I'll be the judge of that, Krampus said, taking out a spoon and sampling the broth. After smacking his lips together several times, his eyes narrowed. Who was put in charge of cooking? The elves all pointed to a singular elf. I didn't know how they discerned this, since the outfits they wore made them all look the same. I'm guessing they went off smell. Krampus went over to the elf, who shrank in his presence. What kind of peppers did you use? Krampus asked. Ghost peppers, sir? The elf timidly replied. His breath was cut short when Krampus snatched him by the throat, lifting him into the air. Do you think I'm a bitch? He screamed in the elf's face. That pussy pepper isn't spicy enough for me, you piece of shit. With a single throw, Krampus hurled the elf across the room and out a window. I realised then we must be high up, because his screams faded as he was falling. Plus, I didn't hear him hit the ground. What the hell is going on? I demanded. Krampus whipped his head in my direction, regarding me the same way a farmer would rowdy animals at a slaughterhouse. That should be obvious. I'm going to eat you. Eat me? I panicked, struggling to break free of my bindings to no avail. Yes, you see, Simon, punishing the brats of the world is exhausting. Santa and I agreed that once a year, on December 5th, aka krampusnacht, I am allowed to feast on one bad child to give me the strength I need for my Christmas Eve run. I'm not a child. I'm old enough to drive. Krampus shrugged and said, close enough. This is horse shit. Look, I know I've fucked up a lot, but there's no way I'm close to the worst person you'll meet this year. I know. What? Krampus sighed in a way that told me he shouldn't need to tell me what he said next. Mostly evil kids never make for good grub. They're always too tough. And the flavour never comes out right. Kids like you are just evil enough. Once you've been simmering for a while, you'll be nice and tender. Please, can't we make a deal? Sorry, the jolly man is the one who calls the shots. Now, where were we? Krampus picked up a cookbook from the floor that was by some jars of spices. Let's see here. More pepper, a little more salt. Extra garlic never hurt anyone, he said, grabbing each ingredient and throwing it in. And we can't forget the spice. Krampus emptied every single pepper among the spices into the pot. The broth boiled viscously like the liquid itself was being overwhelmed by the capsaicin. Krampus tasted it again and nodded satisfactorily to himself. Hesitant, they bickered among each other until one of them was shoved forward. Krampus handed the elf a spoon. The elf looked from him to the pot. We're waiting. Krampus told him, gesturing to the broth. The elf glanced at the floor in what may have been a quick prayer before dipping the spoon into the mixture. Lifting his mouth revealed a pale mouth with jagged black teeth. In a last-ditch effort, the elf attempted to fling the broth away while Krampus was distracted by some other elves bickering in the back. "Wow, boss! The heat almost knocked my shoes off," the elf said. "Damn straight," Krampus replied, taking the spoon and dipping it for more of the broth. He then stomped on the elf's foot, making him yell. When he did, Krampus shoved the spoon under his mask and into his mouth. The elf screamed, clawing at his throat, and collapsing in convulsions on the floor, before becoming still. "You'll see that?" Krampus asked, pointing to the now dead elf. "That's the result of peak spicy." I hadn't even regained consciousness for a full 10 minutes, and I'd already seen 2 people be killed. "And speaking of," Krampus went on, turning to me, "I heard you were having trouble with girls at school, Simon. Don't worry. After this, everyone will think you are really hot." If I hadn't been filled with panic that would have received an eye roll, Krampus ordered the elves by a wheel that controlled the rope I was tied in. "All right, lower him in." The elves were about to comply until Krampus spoke up again. "Wait, do it slowly. Fucking hell, how many times do we have to go over this? If you just drop him in, there's no time for the fear to build, and the dish loses flavour." "1,000 apologies, Master," the elves replied in unison. Little by little, I was lowered towards the pot. All I could do was brace myself for the harrowing way I would meet my doom. "It's a shame though," Krampus said. "I had a strong feeling this would be the year I finally got a bargain." "Didn't you say you couldn't make deals?" I replied. "No, not that. One of the rules for my job has to do with identical twins. If I happen upon some who are naughty, we get to eat both of them." Silently, I thanked whatever cosmic cogs were spinning. "I know some," I shouted as my shoes were touching the broth's surface. Krampus signalled for the elves to cease. "Go on." "They go to my school. Their names are Miller and Mitchell, a couple of spoiled rich kids. They do the same shit I do, except they go around like they're better than everybody, just because they have more money." Krampus scoffed in disgust and responded, "Those kinds of people are the worst. Right? Now, you could proceed with making your Simon stew?" an elf said. "Right." I coughed nervously. "Or you could all get rid of the 2 most annoying people at my school and have twice as much to eat this year." Krampus dug into his long beard, pulling out a deer's skull-shaped pocket watch. "It's only 2. I suppose we have enough time to switch out the main course." He looked back at me. "Very well. It seems you've been granted a bit of fortune." He ordered the elves to get me down. When they did, Krampus told me to follow him outside. "You aren't going to throw me off the mountain like the elf, are you?" With an eye roll, Krampus replied, "No. Why would I let you go just to murder you a few minutes later?" "Right, I guess that makes sense. What do you want to show me then?" "I need you to get home, so we're taking the sleigh." The sleigh was resting at the mountain's edge. The last thing that night to be seared in my brain was that it was being pulled by the animated skeletons of reindeer. When we approached, their necks cracked as they turned their attention to us. Even though none of them had eyes, I felt their disdain. "It's cool, he's with me," Krampus told them, and they relaxed. Brushing snow off the seat, he got into the sleigh and gestured for me to do the same. When I did, he took hold of the reins. I thought he was going to say the names of his reindeer like Santa would. Instead, he took a deep breath and bellowed, "Move your bony asses!" We shot off the mountain and I screamed as we were plummeting. Then Krampus yanked hard, and we were flying. Well, I say that, but it's not that the deer were galloping in the air. I could even hear their hooves as if we were still on solid ground. "Hey, you got a blanket or something?" I asked, shivering. "Don't be a bitch. You'll be home soon." We made quick time, as it wasn't even 1:30 when we touched down on the snow-covered roof of my house. When we did, I collapsed out of the sleigh, throwing up as I did. "How the hell do you and Santa travel like this?" You get used to it." Once my dizziness subsided, I got back up. "I can't get back inside from here." "I got it." Krampus grabbed me by the wrist. The next thing I knew, A pillar of swirling fire consumed us. Before I could even squeak, we were back in front of the fireplace. "There you are. Home sweet home," Krampus said, giving me a light slap on the back. Even that was strong enough to damn near knock the wind out of me. "Yeah, thanks." Nodding, Krampus replied, "I better get going. It's not often I get to indulge in twin gumbo." His expression darkened, making me take a step back. Not many kids can say they survived meeting me. Take this as a chance to change. Otherwise, I may be visiting you again next year, he said, jabbing his clawed finger at my chest. Gulping, I nodded in understanding. "Best of luck to you then." With that, he disappeared back up our chimney. Then I could hear him yelling at his reindeer again, followed by them taking off. When he was gone, I went to the hospital, cooking up a story about falling down the stairs. Krampus made good on his word because when I got back to school, Miller and Mitchell were nowhere to be seen. Needless to say, I took his advice to heart, putting my nose to the grindstone. Things improved both socially and academically for me. It wasn't easy though. It took a while to convince my parents that the increase in my grades wasn't to become a drug dealer. It's been over a decade since then, and I still remember that night like it was yesterday. If he wanted to eat me for what I did, I shudder to think what he does to those who are worse. I tend to get anxious around this time of year. To wrap this up, I'll explain what happened the following year. At midnight on Krampusnacht, I woke up to a burnt smell and a sharp knock on my bedroom window. Lifting it caused a message card to fall into my room. Opening it showed me the following message. "Sometimes, all motivation needs is a little aggression. It's a shame that doesn't apply to everyone. Krampus." At the bottom of the card were 2 gold rings surrounded by soot, with Miller and Mitchell's names engraved on them. Bottom line, if you're a kid who wants to make it to Christmas, you better hope that you never meet Krampus.